The MGF and the TF is probably the best value MG sports car that is available to anybody today. An MGF is a mid-engine car. That means that when it's set up properly, it's an absolute joy. The whole nature of that setup means that it is geared to go round corners quickly, competently, and very satisfyingly. TF is a more focused car in the way in which it's set up, so it's more of a driver's car, although that doesn't mean to say you can't do the same with an MGF. You can, and the options that are available are so wide that it covers virtually every possible variation that owners may want to go down the road with. Because the cars are still relatively new, there is still good supply sources for replacement parts. If you look at an MGB or a midget, it is seen as a car of the bygone age. Yet the MGF and the TF are still new enough to still be reasonably regularly seen on the road, so they're a familiar sight. If you take an MGF or a TF as a project, you have to be mindful that if you buy a £1,000 car and spend £2,000 on it, it will not be a £3,000 car.
So what should you be looking for and at when buying an MGF and TF? What key areas should you be inspecting? And what key issues should you be aware of?
The body was always much better off than previous MGs because the steel that was used was protected by a zinc coating. So this is very good at resisting the onset of rust. The one area of an MGF and TF which doesn't have that benefit are the front and rear subframes. And although they were very thick steel, they only had a coat of paint on them. And there's a lot of cars that are now suffering from corrosion in the subframes. Fortunately, most corrosion issues can be visible. So if you look around the front and rear wheel arches, sometimes around the side indicator lamps, you can see obvious blistering. But the biggest area that is currently causing issues is in the sills, very much like an MGB. So when you look at an MGF or a TF, you want to concentrate quite a lot on the area of the sill area. In other words, anything below the line of the door. MGF and TF probably have the highest profile in respect of failures of the head gasket on their K-series four-cylinder engines. And it is indeed a weakness that is endemic in the range of cars in their early years. Certainly in the last 15 years, developments that were done before MG Rover collapsed have filtered through in the form of the multi-layer steel gasket to actually provide a cure for probably 95% of all the failures. Now, one of the aspects of a head gasket failure in an MGF and TF is the fact that the radiator's at the front of the car and the engine is at the back. You therefore have a large volume cooling system, and it is connected between radiator and engine by long underfloor coolant pipes. And certainly in the original form, those coolant pipes made of mild steel would corrode. For many years, stainless steel replacement pipes have been available, and just like stainless steel exhausts last the lifetime of the car, the stainless steel coolant pipes do also last the life of the car. What you should be looking for in respect of a head gasket failure is primarily a mix of coolant in the oil, which is detected by pulling the dipstick and seeing if there is a creamy mayonnaise in there, undoing the filler cap area, looking inside there, seeing if there's the same coloration. Sometimes you can see a mix of oil and water in the header tank, because you can get cross-contamination in both directions. If you see a car with that and there's no recent history of a head gasket being changed, time to walk. The other aspect that you're looking at on the cooling system is obviously to look at the temperature gauge. That is not as accurate as we would like. So you can often find situations where the temperature gauge sits normal, and then when it's actually going up, it's usually too late. The best way of checking out the operation of the cooling system is obviously to drive the car for sufficient distance that it's going to be up to normal working temperature. So if you see a temperature gauge that is moving above the halfway mark, even if it comes back, it does raise questions. MGF and TF have two different suspension systems. The MGF was introduced with the hydrogas system, which is pressurized fluid over a pressurized gas to provide the suspension medium. TF, on the other hand, moved to a completely different steel spring suspension. Certainly MGFs have some variability with the hydrogas system, and since the spheres that do all the suspension control have not been made since 2002, it's meant that spares have long since dried up, but in more recent years you can get a number of repairs done to those suspension systems. Specifically with the MGF suspension systems, what you have to look for is if the ride height has dropped, especially if it's leaning on one side, and also bright green fluid drips underneath the suspension on any of the corners of the car. Tyre choice specifically is something that has to be seriously considered by any MGF or TF owner. The smaller wheels and tyres are not as sensitive to handling issues as the 16-inch wheels and tyres, primarily because the 16-inch use a much lower profile set of tyres, and being as MGF and TF are both mid-engine cars means that any small difference in wheel and tyre setup and handling really does upset the stability of the car. And it's not unusual to find people with mixing tyres finding that they're doing 360-degree turns or going off into the undergrowth without any real provocation because of the imbalances that come. You should have the same make, model and submodel of tyre on all four wheels. Ideally, they should all be the original MG specified sizes. If you have a mix of tyre and you take the car for a test drive and you find it is extremely sensitive, especially over 50 miles per hour, it's likely that the mix of tyres will be causing that problem. Paint is always going to be expensive to rectify, and certainly resprays, you'll be looking in the area of £5,000. All hoods are in fact interchangeable, whether it's a 1995 MGF or whether it's a 2009 TF. Plastic rear window becomes very brittle with age, and if you simply fold the hood down without removing the rear screen area and lowering that down separately, then often you will end up with a cracked screen. They're a great car. They deliver far more than the costs of the car. That's why it is the car that is the MG of the moment, because it is so affordable. It opens the door for non-MG owners to come into MG ownership at a very affordable price.
Hopefully these helpful tips will see you well on the way to enjoying your new MG. For more free pre-purchase advice, then simply contact the MG Owners Club technical team via the website or the technical hotline.